The morning my son called to tell me I wasn't welcome at my own granddaughter's birthday party, I was standing in my kitchen making coffee the same way I've made it for 40 years. 2 scoops, a little sugar, black. I remember setting the mug down very carefully on the counter, not slamming it, just setting it down. "Dad, it's not a big deal," Bradley said. "Yvonne's parents are flying in from Portland. It's going to be a full house. We just don't have room." I didn't say anything for a moment. I was looking out the window at the backyard, at the oak tree I'd planted when Bradley was 7 years old, the one he used to climb until his mother made him stop because she was afraid he'd break his arm. That tree was 30 feet tall now. "She's turning 4, I finally said. "Dad, I know her birthday cake flavor. It's strawberry. Because I took her to the farmer's market in August, and she ate half a basket of strawberries and couldn't stop talking about them." "Does Yvonne's mother know that?" He didn't answer. "I'll let you go," I said. And I hung up. "I want to tell you something before I go any further. I am not a dramatic man. I spent 31 years as a civil engineer for the state of Georgia, which is about as undramatic a career as a person can have. I measured things. I checked load calculations. I reviewed drainage reports. My whole professional life was about precision and patience and not jumping to conclusions until you had all the data in front of you. So I didn't do anything rash that day. I finished my coffee. I went for my morning walk, 3 miles, same route I've done since my doctor told me to get my blood pressure under control 6 years ago. I came home, I showered, I sat down at my kitchen table, and I thought. And what I thought about, what I kept coming back to, was the fact that this was not the first time. Let me back up. My wife, Carolyn, passed away 11 years ago. Ovarian cancer found late moved fast. Bradley was 26. He handled it the way young men often handle grief, by burying it and moving forward at full speed. Within a year, he was promoted at work. Within 2 years, he was dating Yvonne. Within 3 years, they were engaged. I told myself this was healthy. I told myself Carolyn would have been proud of him. Yvonne is not a bad person. I want to be clear about that. She is ambitious and organized, and she loves my son in her own way. But she is also someone who came from a family where generosity is transactional, where favors are tracked, where love has a ledger. I didn't understand this about her for a long time. I thought I was just seeing a young woman who was guarded. I gave her time. I gave her space. I gave her the benefit of the doubt for years. What I didn't fully see, or maybe what I didn't want to see, was that Bradley had started to see the world through her ledger too. Here is what I had done for them, because I think it matters to say it plainly. When they got married, I paid for the wedding. $42,000 here in Savannah, at a venue on the river that Yvonne had wanted since she was a little girl. I didn't blink. Carolyn and I had saved carefully our whole lives, and I knew Carolyn would have wanted to give them a beautiful start. When they found the house, a 4-bedroom in a good school district in Richmond Hill, they were $28,000 short on the down payment. I wrote the check. Bradley hugged me in the driveway of that house and said, "Dad, I don't know what we'd do without you." I remember that hug. I've thought about it a lot lately. When Bradley's landscaping business hit a rough patch during the supply chain problems 3 years ago, I lent him $19,000 to cover payroll and equipment. He paid back $6,000 of it. I never asked about the rest. It wasn't about the money. I also want to mention the smaller things, because I think the smaller things are what actually tell the story. I drove 40 minutes each way every Tuesday to pick up my granddaughter Lily from preschool because Yvonne had gone back to work and they couldn't afford the aftercare program yet. I did that for 8 months. I fixed their fence after the hurricane. I repainted their guest room when they asked me to. One Thanksgiving, I drove to 3 different grocery stores because Yvonne forgot to order the specific brand of cranberry sauce her mother liked. And she called me in a panic, and I went, "Because that is what you do." I did all of it because I wanted to, because I love my son, because Lily is the closest thing I have left to Carolyn in this world. She has her grandmother's eyes, the same pale gray that looks blue in certain light, and when she laughs she covers her mouth the same way Carolyn used to, and for a long time I told myself it was enough, that the relationship we had was real, even if it was sometimes one-sided. That families go through phases, that Bradley would find his footing. But then the calls started getting shorter. The visits started getting scheduled further apart. Last Christmas, I sat at their dining room table for 3 hours, and Yvonne spent most talking to her sister on the phone in the other room. Bradley shrugged when I looked at him. Lily fell asleep in my arms before dinner was even finished. Then there was my birthday in March. I turned 64. I didn't need a party. I didn't even need a gift. I just wanted to see them. Bradley texted me a photo of a gift card he'd bought and said they'd come by later in the week. Later in the week became later in the month. The gift card is still in my kitchen drawer. It's for a restaurant in Midtown that I have never once been to. And then there was the phone call about Lily's birthday party. My own granddaughter's party. I had already bought her gift. A wooden art set with real watercolor paints, because she'd been obsessed with painting since I showed her how to do it the summer before. I'd wrapped it myself with paper that had little strawberries on it, because of the farmer's market, because she loves strawberries. That's when I sat down at my kitchen table and I looked at the full picture for the first time without flinching. I am not going to tell you that I came to my decision quickly or dramatically. I didn't. I sat with it for a week. I called my friend Howard, who I've known since college, who has always told me the truth even when I didn't want to hear it. I told him everything. The wedding, the down payment, the $19,000, the Tuesdays, the fence, the cranberry sauce. Howard was quiet for a long time after I finished. Then he said, "Cliff, when's the last time Bradley called you first? Not to ask for something, just to call." I thought about it. I couldn't remember. I want to stop here for a moment and say something important. This is not a story about money. I know it can sound like one. There are numbers in it, and numbers make things feel transactional. But I was not keeping score. I was not building a case. What I was doing, finally, was being honest with myself about what the relationship actually was versus what I had been telling myself it was. The truth was this: I had become a resource, not a father, not a grandfather. A resource, one that could be drawn on when needed and put on a shelf when not. And I had allowed it because I loved them, and because I missed Carolyn, and because having them in my life at all felt better than not having them. But here's what I also understood. Sitting at that table, I had a choice. Could keep going. I could show up at the margins they gave me, take the scraps of time they offered, and be grateful for them. Some people do this. Some people decide that any relationship is better than no relationship, and they live their whole lives in that smaller, diminished version of love. Or I could stop, not out of anger, not for revenge. I want to be clear about that because I think it's important. What I decided was not retaliation. It was self-preservation. It was the quiet recognition that I deserved to be treated like a person, and that if I couldn't have that with my son and his wife, then I needed to stop pretending I did. So I made some decisions. The first was about the loan. I had never formalized the $19,000 because it was family, and I hadn't wanted it to feel like a business transaction. That was my mistake. I spoke with my attorney, a woman named Patricia. Actually, no. I spoke with my attorney. She helped me document what had been lent and what had been repaid, and we sent Bradley a formal repayment notice for the remaining $13,000. He called me within 20 minutes, furious. "What is this?" he said. "Are you serious right now?" "I'm very serious," I said. "The paperwork explains everything clearly." "Dad, why are you doing this?" "Because of the party. Because Lily's party." "This isn't about the party, Bradley. I should have done this years ago. I'll give you 90 days to arrange a repayment plan." He hung up. Yvonne called me back 30 minutes later, and her voice had that particular tone, the one she uses when she is being careful, when she is calculating, when she wants something. She told me she thought we'd had an understanding about the money. I told her that understanding should be written down, and that I wished her a good evening. The second decision was about the house. This one took longer, and it was harder because it involved my granddaughter, and I had to think very carefully about it. Here is the relevant fact. Bradley's house has a mortgage. The property taxes on that house are paid through an escrow account. For the past 3 years, I had been making a monthly contribution to that escrow, $340 a month, because when they first bought the house, the tax estimate had been miscalculated and they were short. I had stepped in to help, and then I had simply kept paying because it became habit, and because I didn't want them to have a shortfall. I stopped the payment. I sent Bradley a certified letter letting him know that, as of the first of the following month, I would no longer be contributing to the escrow account. I gave him 60 days' notice, so there would be no surprises. He did not call about that one. Yvonne did. And this call was very different from the first one. There was no careful tone this time. She told me I was punishing them, that I was being childish, that I was using money to control them. She said some other things that I will not repeat here, because they were unkind and because I've chosen not to carry them. I listened to everything she said. When she was finished, I said, "Yvonne, I've been contributing to your household for a long time. I'm not punishing you. I'm just stopping. That's my right." Then I wished her well and I got off the phone. The third decision was the hardest. It was about me. I had spent 11 years, since Carolyn died, anchoring my life around Bradley and Lily. My whole sense of purpose, my social life, my weekly routines, all of it was organized around being useful to them. My identity had quietly become Bradley's dad and Lily's grandpa, and I had let that happen because it was easier than figuring out who I was on my own again. So I decided to figure that out. I signed up for a pottery class at the Arts Center on Abercorn Street, something I had thought about for years and always set aside. I called an old colleague from the DOT who'd retired to Hilton Head and had been asking me to come visit for 2 years. I bought a plane ticket to visit my brother in Tucson, the first time I'd been out there in 4 years. I called Howard, and we made plans to drive up to the mountains in October, the way we used to do when we were younger. And I did one more thing. I told Bradley I needed some space, not permanently, not dramatically. I sent him a letter, a real letter, handwritten, 3 pages, and I told him that I loved him, and that I was not cutting him off or giving up on him or punishing him. I told him that I needed to step back because the relationship we'd had wasn't a real relationship, and that I hoped that someday we could build a real one. I told him that I wanted to know my granddaughter, and that I hoped he would find a way to allow that. And I told him that I was going to be fine, that for the first time in a long time, I was choosing to take care of myself. I did not hear back for 6 weeks. Those 6 weeks were not easy. I want to be honest about that. There is a particular loneliness in stepping back from a relationship you've worked hard to maintain, even when you know it was doing you harm. There were nights when I second-guessed myself. There were mornings when I picked up my phone to call him, and then put it back down. There were moments when I thought about Lily's pale gray eyes, and it felt like something was tearing in my chest. But there were also other things. There was the pottery class, where I was, without question, the worst student in the room, and somehow didn't mind at all. There was Hilton Head, where my friend and I sat on the porch, eating boiled peanuts, and talked for 6 hours about everything and nothing. There was Tucson, where my brother took me hiking at sunrise and didn't ask me a single question about Bradley and just let me be there. There was October in the mountains with Howard, where the leaves were so bright they looked like something that shouldn't exist. I started sleeping better. I started cooking again. Really cooking, not just reheating things. I started reading in the evenings instead of watching television. Small things, but they added up to something. The call from Bradley came on a Sunday afternoon in November. I was in the backyard raking leaves. "Dad," he said, and I could tell from just that one word that something had shifted. His voice was different, younger, almost. The defensive flatness that had been there for years was gone. "Hi, son," I said. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I read your letter a lot of times." I stopped raking. "Okay," I said. I didn't want to hear it. At first, I was angry. He paused. "Yvonne and I have been fighting a lot. She thinks I should. She wanted me to, anyway. We've been fighting." I didn't say anything. "I called Mom's sister," he said. "Aunt Ruth. I haven't talked to her in 3 years. Did you know that? 3 years?" "I knew," I said. "She told me some things about Mom, about what Mom was like, what she cared about." His voice caught a little. "She told me Mom would be pretty disappointed in me right now." I sat down on the back steps. The oak tree was in front of me, bare now, its branches making that particular winter shape against the gray sky. "Your mother would not say disappointed," I said. "She would say she believed in you, and she was waiting for you to catch up." He was crying by then. So was I, a little, though I wasn't going to tell him that. "I'm sorry, Dad," he said. "I'm really sorry." We talked for an hour and 40 minutes. We talked about things we hadn't talked about in years, about Carolyn, about the early days of his marriage, about how he'd let Yvonne's way of seeing things become his way of seeing things without ever meaning to. He talked about feeling like he was failing her and failing me and failing Lily all at once. He talked about how it was easier to just manage everything from a distance than to actually feel it. I told him I understood that. I told him I had done the same thing after his mother died. We didn't solve anything in that phone call. Real things don't get solved in one phone call. But something opened. He asked if he could bring Lily to see me the following weekend, just the two of them. I said yes. That Saturday, he pulled into my driveway, and Lily came running across the yard in her boots and her winter coat, and she ran straight at me the way small children do, without hesitation, without calculation, with that absolute certainty that you will catch them. I caught her. She smelled like strawberries. I don't know if it was her shampoo or her lip balm or just some trick of memory, but she smelled like strawberries, and she buried her face in my shoulder and said, "Grandpa, I missed you," and I held her and thought, okay. Bradley stood at the edge of the yard watching us. When I looked up at him over Lily's head, he gave me a small nod, not quite an apology, not quite a promise, something between them, a beginning. Later, after Lily fell asleep on the couch with the television on low, Bradley and I sat at my kitchen table with coffee, the same table where I'd made my decisions, the same mugs, the same window looking out at the same tree. "I'm going to pay back the money," he said. "All of it." "I know," I said. "I talked to Yvonne about it. It wasn't." He stopped, started again. "We're going to couples therapy. She didn't want to at first, but she agreed." I nodded. "I don't know if she's going to change," he said quietly. "I don't know if we're going to be okay, but I know I wasn't being the person I was supposed to be, and that part, I can fix." I looked at my son across the table. He was 40 years old, and he looked tired in a way that wasn't just about sleep, and I thought about all the years I'd spent watching him become someone I didn't quite recognize. But I also thought about the boy who used to climb that oak tree, about the 26-year-old who'd stood at his mother's grave and held himself completely still, because he didn't know any other way to hold his grief. He had always been trying. He had just gotten lost. "You were always a good kid," I said. "You just had a hard few years." He looked at his coffee. "You never gave up on me." I thought about that. About the weeks I'd spent wondering if I was doing the right thing. About the mornings I'd put down the phone. "I didn't give up on you," I said. "I gave up on a version of our relationship that wasn't real. That's different." He nodded slowly. "But your mother's waiting," I said, "and she's not patient." He laughed at that, a real laugh surprised out of him. It sounded like him, the real him. Lily stirred on the couch and murmured something in her sleep. We both looked over at her. Her boots were still on. Her coat was in a heap on the floor. "She's got your mother's eyes," I said. "I know," Bradley said. "I know she does." The oak tree in the backyard had no leaves left, but come April it would be full of them again. That particular pale green that only lasts a few weeks before it deepens into summer. I'd watched it do that for 30 years. I figured I had a few more rounds left in me. Outside, the evening had gone quiet. Inside, my son and I sat with our coffee and didn't say anything for a while, and it was the most comfortable silence I'd had in a very long time. Some things, when they break, don't go back together the way they were. They go back together differently, with the cracks showing, with the mend visible. I've come to think that's not always worse. Sometimes the rebuilt thing is stronger in the places it had to be repaired. Sometimes the breaking is what finally makes two people look at each other honestly. I don't know what comes next for Bradley and Yvonne, or for the four of us as a family. I've stopped trying to know. What I know is that my granddaughter ran across my yard and let me catch her, and my son sat at my table and told me the truth, and outside the window the tree we planted together is still standing. That's enough. For now, that is more than enough.